If you actually go and look, what are the anxieties for Democrats right now? I mean, literally every single demographic group. Democrats are clearly professional
old
warriors.
whites, young whites.
I made a list. Okay, in just the last few days, there have been articles worrying about Kamala Harris's problem with black male voters, with male voters, with Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin voters, with Arab American voters, with young voters, and on the list goes.
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. We got Susan Glass, our staff writer at The New Yorker. She has a weekly column on life in D.C. She's also the co-author of The Divider, A History of Donald Trump in the White House, which she co-wrote with her husband, Peter Baker. How you doing, Susan?
Hey, great to be with you.
Good to be with you, too. We have much to cover, unfortunately. There's a lot of dystopia out there, and we have to discuss our anxieties, which you were writing about in The New Yorker this week. But first, you have a deep reservoir of knowledge, both of Trump and Putin and Russia, from your time over there. And so we had some new revelations this week about Donald Trump's relationships with Putin. I wanted your kind of top-line thoughts on what we learned about the phone calls, the COVID tests.
Yeah, I mean, look, a Bob Woodward book is always an event, especially a few weeks before an election. It's really interesting. First of all, on the COVID test, remarkable. You saw Democrats rushing right away to cut an ad. In fact, it seemed to be so damaging. Woodward reported that Trump secretly sent COVID testing equipment to Vladimir Putin for his personal use at the height of the pandemic, when those things were actually hard to obtain. And the quotes in Woodward book that really leapt out at me was just this idea that Putin is advising Donald Trump, don't tell anybody about this, because it might hurt you. He was aware of the sensitivity for Trump of the political relationship. Donald Trump was vulnerable on the Putin issue. Putin could care less, right? You could say anything about him because he doesn't have any meaningful domestic opposition. What's notable is that the Kremlin actually confirmed the COVID testing equipment. Now, the other revelation
why do you think that was, that the Kremlin confirmed it? I thought that was interesting. Like, they didn't have to do that. I thought it was interesting, and that kind of hurts Trump, I would think.
Well, what would really hurt Trump would be if they confirmed that the two had been speaking in the 4 years since Trump left office. That's the other revelation in the book. It's based on a single source. Other people have tried, talked to numerous sources inside the U.S. intelligence community, in the Biden administration, national security types. Nobody has definitive proof that this occurred, although I did speak with one very senior official who said, you might be surprised, but it's actually possible that we would not know about this. And, the thing is that people believe it. I think that people will find it believable. And that's because Donald Trump has this obsession with Vladimir Putin. And he talks about him even in his rallies in 2024. It's so extraordinary to me to hear the guy. He never talks very much about foreign policy, but what does he always do? He always brags about his good relationship with Vladimir Putin and other of America's adversaries, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, but always Putin. It's always Putin with Donald Trump.
Yeah, I wonder what your sense is of the phone call thing, because you're right to point out it's one source, and it's a Trump staffer, which, like, you can never divine the motivations of these people, right? I mean, they just lie all of the time, which is why I really kind of hated the DC journalist practice. Like, one anonymous Trump person says this and another says this. It's like they both can be lying. They're just the degree to which they lie is a category difference from how other political staffers lie and spin the truth. And so it's like, okay, so there's one staffer that says this. Trump slipped at one point relatively recently where he talked about talking to Putin, but it was typical Trump word salad. So it's kind of hard to tell whether it was like a false brag or whether it doesn't do English well, or whether he did actually slip. And so anyway, I don't know. You've been calling around, like, what is your sense of the probability that this is what would they be talking about?
Well, listen, Donald Trump is not very good at, obscuring things in a way. And so often he will say in public, very similar things to the things that he says in private. So what I would say is listen to what Trump has been saying publicly about Putin, about Russia, about the war in Ukraine, and you probably get a sense of what might be coming out of if he is having any interactions. Well, what's he saying? He's saying, oh, I can solve this war in 24 hours. Okay, fine. Dismiss that as bluster. But he's basically been advancing a version of Putin's own preferred endgame for the war, which is that Russia would get to keep all of its stolen territory, that Russia basically, could hold on to the land that it illegally got at the cost of, hundreds of thousands of lives, disruption for millions of people, invasion of another country, outright flouting of the international order. Donald Trump thinks basically we should let Putin have, the what he can gobble up of Ukraine, and that's their version that they're going to try to turn around and sell as a quote peace deal, and they're going to pressure Zelensky for, essentially to trade land for peace. And you saw this very uncomfortable moment actually at the UN General Assembly in September where Trump met with Zelensky. And even there with Zelensky standing by his side, what did he do? He talked about Vladimir Putin and how he has good relations with him. So I think that we do have an indication that they would have a lot to talk about, since Trump seems like he might be carrying water for Russia in any future negotiation with Ukraine.
So I know you're a reporter, not a guesser, but you think that it's happening? I mean, I guess we can't be sure, but it seems all evidence points to the fact that it was happening, that they're really having back channel calls.
Yeah, I mean, look, history will show. I believe that a source told Woodward that this? Yes, absolutely. Bob Woodward, is reporting accurately what he was told. We'd all like to have more evidence because it seems pretty important, by the way, for the national security of this country and our allies, that we should understand, what is going on with Donald Trump running a rogue foreign policy out of Mar-a-Lago. And because of the uncertainty, by the way, of our American domestic political circumstances, this is something that I think people don't really appreciate. Other countries around the world, whether they're our allies or, countries that aren't as close to us, they have been seeking out Trump. Trump has been talking with them, engaging with them for the last couple of years, and especially this year, as it's become very possible that he might return to the White House. People around the world, they get that we are so internally divided that we don't speak with one voice anymore. And so they've had to go to Trump and his advisors to try to figure out what is the foreign policy of the Republican Party. Because unfortunately, they have a foreign policy that's different right now than the foreign policy of the United States. They have a foreign policy of Trump. And so he's already been playing a role, in speaking with many different international interlocutors, I've been told. And of course, there's a lot, by the way, of our European allies, who are desperately been trying to work the levers that they have here in the United States to get to Republicans, to get to Donald Trump, to try to stop him from openly undermining our support for Ukraine, or to stop him from openly undermining NATO, for example. And, you're going to see that on steroids if Trump wins again.
It is really crazy when you put it that way, thinking about it historically. It's not like during the Bush term, there were foreign hostile powers going to John Kerry's compound in Massachusetts to try to divine what the opposition party wants. This is a totally unique to Trump phenomenon that is not that in the post World War II era between the parties.
Absolutely. And Tim, I'm glad you brought up John Kerry, because this is another point, on this issue of the phone calls that may or may not have occurred between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin after he left the White House. Well, put the other hat on. If this was an allegation made about one of Trump's opponents, what would he do? He would be going crazy. He would be demanding an investigation. He would be demanding that the Justice Department arrest this person and try them for treason. Why do I say that? I'm not speculating. Donald Trump actually did this with regards to John Kerry. He was obsessed when he was the president at complaining that John Kerry was allegedly speaking with the Iranians with whom he had negotiated the Iran nuclear deal. And Trump was constantly, according to our reporting, demanding of his advisors, you should try John Kerry for treason. It's illegal. He shouldn't be allowed to talk to the Iranians while I'm the president of the United States. And this was actually a running theme for Trump, was the, alleged, treasonousness of John Kerry to even dare to speak with any Iranians once he was out of office as Secretary of State. Well, it's pretty rich, isn't it, that Donald Trump would have said that for 4 years and then actually have reportedly had repeated interactions with America's biggest adversary, arguably, on the world stage right now.
Okay, one last thing on this. You mentioned at the top that there were ads already about the COVID revelation. I think it's been interesting that the vice president has spoken about it, I think 3 times since the revelation came out, which is pretty noteworthy, right? Because they don't have polling on this stuff yet. It's a little bit of a gut thing. And I think there's a sense of how powerful it is. Our friends at Republican Voters Against Trump have one of those ads that you mentioned. I just want to listen to this ad, which is mostly what Harris has been saying on the stuff.
And Donald Trump secretly sent COVID test kits to Putin, an adversary to the United States, because he admires dictators when the American people are dying by the hundreds and in need of relief. That is just the most recent, stark example of who Donald Trump is. And what I see, people are coming together of all different backgrounds to say, you know what, do we want a president who's going to abide by the oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, or someone who is full-time engaged in flattery from Vladimir Putin and sending COVID testing kits over to him when Americans are dying every day?
To me, part of that is just the powerful kind of story into the frame that Donald Trump cares about himself and his autocratic buddies rather than you. It also is like they really are speaking to the Nikki Haley voters. There was a period of time where Liz Cheney wasn't going to campaign together with them. It's going to be separate. She wasn't at the convention. It seems to me like there is a belief inside the Harris team that there are national security Republicans that are gettable.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, remember, there's a whole wing of the Republican Party, we call it Liz Cheney Republicans or Nikki Haley Republicans, who've been actually critical of Joe Biden, from the right, and the view that he wasn't doing enough to support Ukraine. Well, that is literally almost incompatible with support of Donald Trump, right? If you are a Republican who believes that we're not doing enough to support Ukraine, then it seems to me that Harris's campaign's job is to point out that it should be inconceivable for you to support Donald Trump. So I've always thought that Putin particularly was this kind of political liability for Trump in this election year. I feel like foreign policy more broadly, I can understand why Democrats aren't engaging on it as much. You have the problems in Biden's own record with the withdrawal from Afghanistan. You have the Israel-Gaza questions that they do not want to stir up anymore. But on this particular issue of Trump's obsession with Putin, of his preference for dictators and strongmen over America's allies, of his indifference to Americans, this is a really it just happened that this Woodward revelation about the COVID test, was the perfect marriage of, 2 of the themes of the Harris campaign. One, as you said, was the theme that he doesn't care about you. But then the other theme is just that he is an aspiring strongman who loves other strongmen.
Last night, I want to move on to Barack Obama and Josh Shapiro had an event for the vice president in Pittsburgh. And there was a segment of the Obama speech that he was getting emotional. And here I am, of all the things, here we are in 2024. I got Barack Obama getting me emotional. So who knows what the future holds. But I want to play, it's a little bit longer of a clip than I usually play, but I think it's important to hear the full context. Here's Barack Obama talking about what Trump has been saying in response to the hurricane.
Knew it wasn't true. Even local Republicans said it was not true. And now the people of Florida are dealing with another devastating storm. And I want you to watch what happens over the next few days, just like the last time. You're going to have leaders who try to help, and then you have a guy who will just lie about it to score political points, and this has consequences. Because people are afraid and they've lost everything, and now they're trying to figure out, how do I apply for help? And some of them may be discouraged from getting the help they need. The idea of intentionally trying to deceive people in their most desperate and vulnerable moments. And my question is, when did that become okay? I'm not looking for applause right now. I want to ask Republicans out there, people who are conservative, who didn't vote for me, who didn't agree with me. I had friends who disagreed with me on every issue. When did that become okay? Why would we go along with that? I mean, if your coworkers acted like that, they wouldn't be your coworkers very long. If you're in business and somebody you're doing business with just outright lies and manipulates, you stop doing business with them. Even if you had a family member who acted like that, you might still love them, but you tell them you got a problem. And you wouldn't put them in charge of anything. And yet, when Donald Trump lies or cheats or shows utter disregard for our Constitution, when he calls POWs losers or fellow citizens vermin, people make excuses for it.
Susan, for podcast listeners, like that pause in the remarks is Obama getting overcome with emotion. And you can sense it throughout the clip, just about how just flabbergasted he is, that there's just a total absence of Republicans, a lot of Republicans that he knew and served with, speaking out about this.
Yeah, Tim, I was really struck by Obama's speech last night. I thought it was very powerful. In some ways, it was a better speech and more visceral and raw than his convention speech, which was also an excellent speech. Obama's an excellent speech maker. But last night in particular, I really felt like that was the Obama that felt like the essential Obama, the one that we needed to hear from. I worry a little bit that it's late in the day to hear that. But what he succeeded in doing in that speech that I think is not easy for us is recapturing the kind of necessary outrage and incredulity that we are where we are. And that's very hard to do because these are not fresh outrages in some ways. And I think for me as a writer, I'm sure for you in doing your work, like we're 9 years into this. We're 9 years into this Trump era. And, how do you kind of be in the moment, but also be clear and articulate exactly what the stakes are? And I just think that that's been, for me, one of the big challenges of this 2024 campaign.
Yeah, and I think that particularly for the campaign and for its surrogates, there is an advocacy here. I mean, on the one hand, it's emotionally satisfying, right? And I to do the shame on you, Republicans, because they deserve the shame on you, and I like to be emotionally satisfied. But there also there is an element up to your point of this. We're 9 years in. There's a category of people out there that do not like Donald Trump. They show up in every Sarah Longwell focus group, in every poll, but might vote for him anyway, or might just stay home and not vote for Kamala Harris. And you need to find ways to reach these people with appeals, either emotional appeals or visceral appeals, or scare them in a way that can kind of shake it free in the last month. And like that is, they need to do it, right? And giving just sort of a paint by numbers critique of Trump, like that just is white noise at this point.
Yeah, I think that's you summed it up. It can't be white noise. People have to understand in an election as close as this, in the states where it matters, at least, it's not enough just to sort of shrug and go along with the herd. And Barack Obama was essentially trying to separate folks from the herd, say like, you matter, you need to take action here. You have agency. This is your choice, not some choice, that you're just going to sleepwalk into.
There's one other thing he said not during the speech that got a lot of attention. I guess it was at a stop beforehand that I want to talk about, because he was speaking to younger black men. And you can sense in his quote here his frustration. I think the concerns are a lot of concerns, which will get us to your story next, in the Democratic world about bleed among black men and Hispanic men. But here's what Obama said, describing why he thinks that some of these men are becoming Trump curious. Part of it makes me think that you aren't just feeling the idea of having a woman as president and you're coming up with other alternatives or other reasons for that. You're thinking about sitting out or supporting somebody who has a history of denigrating you because you think that's a sign of strength, because that's what being a man is, putting women down. That's not acceptable. That wasn't on the teleprompter. So you knew that was something that he was trying to get off his chest. I mean, what do you have any, I guess, kind of thoughts about the message, but also thoughts about how I think that's reflective of a very real concern in Democratic world right now?
Yeah, I mean, you can see how much there's a fear, whether it's quotes from activists on the ground in cities like Detroit talking about turnout there, whether it is, a politician like Obama, right? He's America's breakthrough president. He is America's first Black president. And I think for him, of course, it must be personal. The idea that Black men would not turn out for this history-making moment to support a Black woman, I think that would be a personal tragedy for him, as well as I think he believes a tragedy for the country as a whole. So I understand the visceral nature of that appeal from him. And, look, it's also, frankly, let's be real, like, my God, what has happened to the country that just because Donald Trump, appears on a few bro podcasts, we're like, oh my God, men love him. This guy is campaigning on the most pure campaign of raw hate, bias, and just garbage. Most of it directed at people of color that I have ever seen. So the idea that people of color would want to support a man who vilifies law-abiding Black immigrants to our country, says they're eating dogs in Springfield, Ohio. I mean, that's probably a moment for some visceral outrage.
And this takes us to your piece for the week. A headline in the New Yorker: the Harris-Trump endgame is on. Is it time to panic yet? You talk about the traditional ritual of Democrats panicking while Republicans bang their chest. I want to talk about kind of the psychology of that in a second, but just speaking for myself, as I guess I'm emotionally a Democrat now, having not voted for a Republican for 10 years, because I'm panicking, and it ties directly to this group we're talking about. I feel like I have a very good feel for how Harris is doing in my demo, the middle to high income college educated former Republican class, and I think that she's doing well enough to win. It's just that worries. Like I have less personal visibility to non-college Black and Hispanic men, and I talk to pollsters, you talk to experts, but it's just like the numbers are the numbers, and she just is lagging with those groups, and that makes the map very tough when you look at Georgia, Nevada, Arizona. So anyway, what are the big anxieties that you hear from Democrats? Is that at the top of the list, or are there other things?
Honestly, Tim, if you actually go, and I made a little survey of this for my New Yorker column, if you actually go and look, what are the anxieties for Democrats right now? I mean, literally every single demographic group. Democrats are clearly professional.
Old whites, young whites.
I made a list. Okay, in just the last few days, there have been articles worrying about Kamala Harris's problem with Black male voters, with male voters, with Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin voters, with Arab American voters, with young voters, and on the list goes. She has a Biden problem. She has a baby problem. She has a hurricane problem. There's the scaries are the way that Democrats, it's like the opposite of self-soothing. There was one Democratic strategist, Simon Rosenberg, tweeted the other day. He said, I'm getting barraged with so many online fundraising ads from Harris and all the other Democratic candidates warning that they're about to lose. It's like we're running a massive daily psyop on ourselves. So we're basically, it seems like the Democratic strategy is to scare the crap out of its own base and hope, that produces its own reaction and people showing up to vote or something like that. But, look, is it a scary moment? Should you be scared? Yes. Is it remarkable that after everything we know as a country collectively about Donald Trump, he has not moved at all in the polls from being highly, highly competitive and a serious contender to win this? On October 10th, the 538 polling average was in the national surveys was 2.5% lead for Harris. That's a pretty slim lead. It's behind where both Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden were at this point in the campaign. Okay, that's October 10th. Where was that polling average on September 10th? The day of the debate? It was the exact same. It was 2.5%. That means that the debate that everybody, even many Republicans agree Kamala Harris won, didn't make a difference. It means that all the crazy stuff that Donald Trump did and said since then didn't make a difference. And to me, that's a crisis. Okay, fine. So I guess we should panic about that.
Yeah, I'm panicking listening to you talk about it. The flatlining. I guess I think there's a psychological question and a practical question. To the practical question first. I don't understand the argument that the argument that it would help the Democrats if everybody was walking around saying it's going great. We're gonna crush them. I get this message all the time, but I had one yesterday that stands out. That's like, why don't you have Michael Moore on your podcast? He's predicting a landslide. I'm like, what? I don't understand what the efficacy is of that, of everyone thinking that it's a landslide. I think it hurt Hillary. There's actual evidence that I don't just think it. There's substantive evidence that it hurt Hillary, that people assumed that she was going to win. And so some of this is like the Harris campaign wants people to think it's close, right? Like, isn't that part of this? Like that there's Democrats online that want people to think it's a blowout, but the Harris campaign wants people to think it's close. But isn't that right?
Look, fear is a motivator, and the very real possibility of Donald Trump has been the greatest motivator to get Democrats out to vote for this entirety of the Trump era. And I think that it is going to be a major reason for Harris's victory. It will be because she convinced enough of the electorate that Donald Trump was an unacceptable threat to the country. If she wins, that's going to be the reason. So yeah, of course, this is the strategy, but believe me, it makes for a lot of sleepless nights. And I think it's not puffery, by the way, though. There is a real basis for it. And I'll tell you, I, had a chilling conversation the other day with, somebody whose opinion about politics I really respect, who's covered, I think, campaigns going all the way back to the 1980s, and who said to me very bluntly, I just, kind of, hey, what's going on? What do you think? He said, if the election were held today, Donald Trump would win in just that kind of flat, categorical, unequivocal way. And, I've not stopped thinking about it ever since.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's the case. But on the other hand, I look at the map and I'm like, I can get to 276 for her, which is just way too close. I mean, Biden was over 300 electoral votes, and she would be at 276 with Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Nevada. Like, that's kind of it. That's kind of what it looks like to me right now. And that's way too close for comfort. The psychological side of this, it's way back a couple months ago, I had Ezra Klein on. And there was a big kerfuffle because he said that he was talking to a couple private Democrats who were like coming to terms with Trump. This was during the bad times, and that it wasn't as big of a crisis as everybody says, and that we can survive it. And that made a lot of me in particular, but also lots of other people outraged. And while I think that was true, like I think Ezra was talking to people that told him that. To me, like the reason for this psychological gap between Republicans and Democrats isn't so much about the makeup of Republicans and Democrats and like their traits. It's more about the fact that most elite Democrats are genuinely freaked out and worried and panicked about Trump, while most elite Republicans really don't care, like fundamentally don't care, and think that, frankly, they might be better off if they lose. And so what would they have to be freaked out about? Like if there's no stakes, And so to me, like that explains the gap, that there's on one side legitimate stakes and on the other side fake stakes. But what do you think? I mean, you talk to these people privately. Do you think that's a fair assessment, or am I being Pollyanna?
I mean, look, there's certainly a segment of the non-MAGA Republicans who probably really want Donald Trump to lose. They want to get their party back. They don't care. But I think, once again, it's informing potentially disastrous calculations. If that's the reason why Mitt Romney isn't endorsing Kamala Harris, because he thinks that Trump is going to lose and he wants to, quote, maintain his viability within the system. Well, we've seen what happens when people assume that Trump is going to lose and then he doesn't. And I just think that you have to, there's no substitute for doing the right thing. And by the way, it's never too late to do the right thing. And that is my maybe anodyne takeaway from the last 8 years of this crisis in American democracy. Like, okay, we aren't where we want to be, but it's never too late to do the right thing. And I think that's where the power of Obama's speech actually last night came in. Take a moment here, look in the mirror. This is not okay. This is not a man that you would hire for your company. This is not a man that you would let in your house to talk to your children. Okay. And you can't let him be the most powerful man in the world again. And just to the point about, Ezra's Democrats who think it'll be fine if Trump comes back. I have to say that doing the reporting for The Divider, and we spoke to nearly 300 former officials. These are, by and large, almost all Republicans who worked closely with Donald Trump, Republicans who were willing to take appointments in the Trump administration, or nonpartisan career national security people. And what they told us, and I think the conclusion is very clear, that a second term is not going to be like a first term, because the constraints will be largely removed on Donald Trump, first of all. Second of all, that rather than the Pollyannish view that, oh, well, actually everything was just fine in the first term and it worked out okay because the country survived and democracy didn't end, to me, it's the opposite conclusion, which is that the institutions actually were revealed to be far more vulnerable than we understood them to be. And that actually we were really just dependent on a very small handful of individuals to prevent a truly catastrophic outcome, that we were one vice president, one attorney general, one chairman of the Joint Chiefs away from a disaster that is almost inconceivable in our country's history. And so, I just think that, beware the Pollyannas in this season.
Amen to that. I want to talk about a Times story this morning about how Elon Musk is going all in to help Trump. At some level, we all knew this, but there are a couple interesting revelations. One, these days in private conversations, Mr. Musk is obsessive, almost manic about the stakes of the election and the need for Mr. Trump to win. The campaign connected with Elon to prevent the circulation of links to material on the platform, including the leaked J.D. Vance Oppo file. Twitter X did eventually block links to the material and suspended the reporter's account who posted it. And then you have the extent to how much the super PAC is spending and how Musk and Trump are talking, which is illegal and nobody cares, I guess now. We just don't have an FEC anymore because there used to be a wall between super PACs and campaigns where people on the super PAC side couldn't talk to the campaigns, but apparently the laws don't matter if Elon Musk and Donald Trump are involved. So take any of those that you wish, but it's all pretty alarming.
Yeah, I mean, look, I believe that one of the enduring images, whatever the outcome of this 2024 campaign will be, that image of Elon Musk on the stage with Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania last weekend, as you said, manically jumping up and down, sort of cheering and adopting Trump's really dark, apocalyptic even view of the country and the stakes in the election, saying that essentially, what Trump always says, which is that if Kamala Harris wins, we won't have a country anymore. And, first of all, I think it suggests the kind of oligarchic turn, the oligarchic fusion between Trump and a small handful, it should be said, a very small handful of billionaires in this country to whom he is signaling in every way possible he's willing to hand extraordinary power over the government. Let's remember that Elon Musk is one of the largest government contractors in the country. Through his ventures, Tesla and SpaceX, he's getting billions and billions of dollars in U.S. government contracts. He is, subsidies are essentially what got Tesla jump-started, a number of years ago. And Trump has proposed that Elon Musk should chair a government commission that would be charged with essentially reviewing all government spending. We'd be vesting extraordinary power in a campaign contributor, in a billionaire with an inherent conflict of interest. And, where are those establishment Republicans that you talk about? Where's Mitt Romney and Mike DeWine talking about that? It's one of the most corrupt things I've ever heard a presidential candidate offer, by the way. And I've also never seen the spectacle of the campaign's largest benefactor being invited up onto the stage to participate in the electioneering, right? This isn't just like kind of shouting out, a kind of thank you to the hosts, at a fundraising dinner. This is like a rally with tens of thousands of people. And here you're inviting the guy who paid for his slot on the stage. So I find this to be really, we talked about Putin at the beginning of this conversation. I would just like to bring it back there. What I saw there was a system of oligarchic capitalism, a fusion between a small handful of very corrupt, wealthy people, who both supported and bankrolled the political needs of Putin and his insiders, and also were used by Putin and his insiders for their projects to destroy democracy in Russia, its fledgling democracy. And, I don't think Americans want an oligarchy with an unelected Elon Musk determining what, the government should spend money on. And I'm shocked that this has not become a bigger facet of the campaign. And frankly, I'm stunned that so many Republicans, all the ones that you and I know, Tim, who are just going along with Trump's reelection, even if they don't want him to win, what the hell happened to them?
Yeah. Earth to them, earth to our friend Karl Rove, earth to the FEC. It is crazy. To your point, it's like if George Soros would have been on stage with Obama and also been a military contractor, or and also been the head of Solyndra or something. And it's like, what? How is this? What is happening? At the end of the article, they point to Musk saying this: unless Trump wins and we get rid of the mountain of smothering regulations that have nothing to do with safety, humanity will never reach Mars. This is existential. It is kind of hard for me to decipher whether this is an op and there is like a corrupt inside game where Musk does want to control the government, or whether he's lost his mind, or maybe both. But I think they both might be happening in concert with each other.
I mean, look, he's pretty visibly a man, having some kind of a public meltdown. I mean, the jumping up and down, the cackling with Tucker Carlson on his X show, or whatever you want to call it. That was pretty remarkable stuff. Let's just say that the world's richest man clearly seems to have some very, very extreme and radical political views as well, that he is prepared to spend tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars on.
Yeah. Okay. Last thing, just because I saw that you tweeted it, and it's in the New Yorker. It's an obsession of mine I don't ever get to talk about. There's a great New Yorker article that one of your colleagues wrote about the Texan doctor and the disappeared Saudi princesses. And again, this is like how this sort of corruption just gets normalized. People don't even talk about it. Trump, who, as I guess your reporter friend thinks, is possibly the favorite to be the president again, or certainly very possibly the president again. His son-in-law has this huge billions upon dollars of infusion from the Saudis that are literally disappearing, imprisoning their political opponents. And it's not just these princesses. There's Omar and Sarah Al-Jabri, who are who was a project that I worked on about 5 years ago. They're young teenagers that were kids of opposition leaders in Saudi that were jailed. They're still jailed. They're now in their mid-20s. This is a bad person that is on another autocrat that is on the inside if Donald Trump gets in again.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, thank you for calling out my colleague Heidi Blake. She's a fantastic investigative reporter. Her previous piece on sort of Arab princesses being held prisoner. This is now a theme, sadly. It won all the awards. It should. Please check out her reporting in the New Yorker about the Saudi princesses and recognize that these are the kinds of stories that essentially the American oligarchy isn't interested in. That's where they go for the money, for the business. And I know we all got exhausted in 4 years worth of Trump and his allies talking about Hunter Biden endlessly. No one ever seemed to have the appetite to investigate Jared Kushner while still a White House official on the staff of the White House, unlike Hunter Biden, who was trading off of his father's name clearly, but never had any official government position. Jared Kushner was a senior high-ranking official of the United States government. He was a White House official. At the same time, at the end of the Trump presidency, he was working to line up his investment fund that began and essentially was seeded with this $2 billion investment at the personal direction, according to reporting of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. Again, if that's not one of the most straightforward conflicts of interest I've ever seen. We used to talk about the appearance of conflict of interest back in the day in Washington reporting. Well, that's not the appearance. That is an actual conflict of interest.
On the wake up list, House Democrats or Senate Democrats, congressional Democrats, how did Jared Kushner not get brought before a hearing over the last 4 years? Unbelievable. Okay, Susan Glasser, always insightful. Great reporting. Check out her reporting in the New Yorker. Thanks so much for returning to the Bulwark podcast. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. I'll be in Baton Rouge on Saturday night. I get one more free night of fun before we just bear down for the final 3 weeks of this election. So go Tigers. And finally, hope to see some of you out next week. Reminder, Thursday, we will be in Philly, Friday in Pittsburgh, Saturday in Detroit. These tickets are going to sell out. Go to thebulwark.com/events. It is going to be a very fun and hopefully meaningful trip through the swing states. So we'll see y'all then. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll be back on Monday with Bill Kristol. Peace.